There's no shortage of amazing video games out there, from new releases like Clair Obscur Expedition 33 to titles from 30 years ago that have been remastered and released on modern platforms like Ocarina of Time. Unfortunately, even the classics have their issues, however, some of which make them less enjoyable to play. This list will avoid performance issues and glitches, as these are issues that can be addressed over time with patches. Instead, it will focus on fundamental problems that these games suffer from are far more difficult to resolve, even with fan-made mods to their liking. It's a shame that these issues weren't fixed during testing, as they're a blemish on games that are otherwise beloved.
While those two archers in Orlando might be the single most annoying aspect of Dark Souls, they're only in one section of the game, and once bypassed, the player needs to deal with them ever again. No, the bigger problem with Dark Souls is the lack of fast travel, especially when compared to later games. While the player does unlock fast travel after beating Ornstein and Small, they're restricted to a handful of locations. This means that there is a lot of boring running around between areas, especially when the player wants to upgrade their gear or buy items. Dark Souls Remastered had the chance to fix this issue, but alas, the player is stuck running around all day.
Baldur's Gate 3 suffers from the same problem as its predecessor, a massive linear opening area that players have to endure for future playthroughs. Being captured aboard a Minaflare Nautilus ship and needing to escape while it's being attacked by fiends is an electric opening segment for a game, one that sets the tone for things to come. The problem is that Baldur's Gate 3 is a game that people struggled to complete, as they want to start over with new characters and go through Act 1 making different choices. This means they have to rush through the Nautilus as fast as possible, hitting the story points they like, saving Shadowheart, sealing that one OP sword, before they can start the game.
It's a fair assumption that anyone who pays money for Marvel's Spider-Man wants to actually play as Spider-Man. Sure, the developers can squeeze in some Peter Parker civilian scenes, but the bulk of the game should involve web swinging and punching baddies. For some reason, the developers of Marvel Spider-Man decided that a bunch of boring, slow stealth sections with Mary Jane and Miles Morales were necessary. These grind the game's pace to a screeching halt, and they're so completely boring to go through that it's surprising there's no option to skip them. Then again, they shouldn't have been put in there in the first place. Many players rank Marvel Spider-Man as one of the best open-world games since 2020, but these sections are undeniably a drawback.
The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild introduced durability for its weapons, meaning that every sword or bow would break over time, with the exception of the Master Sword, which isn't unlocked until way late into the game. This turned out to be a controversial decision, as fans grew weary of constantly needing to find new gear and weapons that would break mid-battle. It's obvious to see why this system was introduced, as the massive incarnation of Hyrule needed a form of loot to keep players exploring. A mode that disabled weapon durability in Bodagua might have been the middle ground that was needed, with the current iteration of the game being dubbed as a survival mode alongside a story mode where the player has a handful of weapons that don't break.
The most recent game on this list suffers from one of the most baffling omissions in modern gaming. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 lacks any kind of minimap, and it's a massive detriment to a game where exploring and puzzle solving are a huge part of the experience. The developers of Clair Obscur said that the lack of a minimap was so that the players could discover the world in the same way that the expedition does. This explanation might have merit in a game where most areas aren't twisting caverns and dungeons consisting of identical-looking areas. Instead of instilling a sense of wonder, the exploration in Clair Obscur becomes frustrating as the player's constantly backtracking and trying to find the way forward while always suspecting that they missed something. Technically, the worst issue with Bloodborne is its performance, especially since From Software is reluctant to release patches on modern platforms. Still, there's a chance that this could happen someday, so the next biggest problem is the need to farm healing items. The Souls games give players a limited number of restorative items,
but they refresh upon resting at a bonfire. Bloodborne lets players carry lots of healing items, but they're a finite resource that needs to be taken from enemies. Anyone who is stuck throwing themselves against the brutal Bloodborne bosses often needs to take boring breaks, where they either need to gather healing items or return to the hunter's dream to stock up on them, when all they want to do is face their latest foe.
Final Fantasy XIV involves an epic tale of war and loss told across multiple worlds, where the warrior of light must contend with the gods of old and elemental titans, all in an effort to save their world from destruction. Somewhere along the way, they have to slowly follow another character and hide behind trees and rocks in what are easily the worst missions in the game. These missions were introduced in Endwalker, and while it's generally considered to be one of the best Final Fantasy XIV expansions, they're absolute agony to endure. Players signed up for a fantasy MMO, not an Assassin's Creed game. Many fans would take 100 Fetch quests over having to follow another person.
Many video games aren't concerned about the quality of the ending, as they're more about the story experience that leads up to them. Mass Effect wasn't like that, being an epic space opera told across 3 games with decisions that resonate across the trilogy and have a long-lasting impact on the narrative. And then, the ending of Mass Effect 3 happened, and most of the decisions were thrown out, replaced with a handful of choices that offer little resolution or satisfaction. Sure, the endings that were patched in later were improvements, but so much is never explained or expanded on. Hopefully, Mass Effect 4 can earn back some goodwill by explaining just what happened to Commander Shepard.
Much like Persona 5, much like Persona 3, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne helped bring Atlus's brutal JRPG gameplay style to the world. However, rather than gently easing the player in with a firm hand, the developer smacked them in the face with a shovel, thanks to the notorious early game boss fight against the Matador. The Matador is an utter nightmare to face, thanks to moves that boost its accuracy and critical hit rate, along with a multi-hit attack, which lets it abuse the battle system to get more actions during its turn. Players either need to level grind like crazy or go in with a very specific build/party. Those who don't know how to do this can very easily be turned away from the game, which is a shame, as it gets much easier after the Matador when there are more demons on offer and better places to grind.
The Water Temple is one of the most infamous dungeons in video game history due to its confusing design, slow traversal through water, the need to constantly pause the game to switch boots, and unforgiving puzzles that lead to lots of tedious backtracking for people who screw things up. Thankfully, the Nintendo 3DS version of the Water Temple is a lot more bearable, with the player able to switch boots using the bottom screen and the addition of lights that make it easier to see how the pieces connect to each other. That said, it's still a major pain to go through, especially as this version of the game hasn't been ported to modern systems yet. One of the harsh realities of playing retro games on Nintendo Switch Online is that players are stuck playing older versions of games and don't get to enjoy the quality of life improvements from remakes and remasters.